They thought he was just an old man, wandering the paint aisle again like he always did, gripping the list scribbled on a receipt, his hands steady, his eyes not so much. But nobody ever stopped to ask what the list was for. The cashier joked he must be bored or senile. One of the employees whispered he talked to himself near the caulking tubes. But on that morning, when Miles Hargrave reached out to ask where they kept the weatherproof wood sealant, the kind he always bought, the kind he once used to rebuild a widow's porch for free, he wasn't looking for pity. He just needed help. The manager barely looked up, some hotshot named Brent with a jawline sharp enough to draw blood and a smirk that didn't know when to quit. He strutted down the aisle like he was delivering a sermon and barked, "You lost again, old man," before Miles could finish his sentence. When Miles chuckled softly, sheepish but kind, and mentioned that his memory sometimes flickered, head injury, 2007, roadside bomb, Brent made a show of looking shocked. "PTSD? Oh no," he called out, loud enough for the front of the store to hear. "Aisle 7's about to get real spooky." Laughter echoed from behind a nearby pallet. One of the teenage stock boys snorted and said something about ghosts and war stories. But Miles didn't react, not visibly, anyway. He just blinked twice, slowly, like a camera shutter stuck on a memory nobody else could see. You could almost see the smile fall off his face in slow motion, replaced by something older, heavier, worn-in like his coat. He nodded once, softly, as if trying to excuse their behavior instead of defending his own. Then he placed the sealant list back in his breast pocket, creased, same fold since February, and turned to walk toward the exit. Nobody stopped him, except one girl. Sierra. She was 19, maybe 20, barely old enough to rent a hotel room, but her brother had served in Ramadi, and she knew that look. She stepped quietly out from behind the customer service desk, called out, "Sir," and caught up with him at the sliding doors. He paused, not startled, just tired, and glanced at her with the kind of gentle dignity that made her throat tighten. "Was it true?" she asked. "The IED?" Miles nodded. "Didn't hit the Humvee. Hit the truck I was in." We all walked out. "But I don't always walk straight now." She swallowed hard. He smiled faintly, like he didn't want her to feel bad. "Thanks for not laughing," he added, and stepped into the morning light without waiting for an answer. If you believe PTSD is real, and no one who wore the uniform should ever be laughed at for the battles they still fight, then like and subscribe, because what happened next changed everything. Sierra turned back into the store as Brent continued to mock Miles to a few other employees, reenacting the scene, making twitchy gestures with his hands and saying, "Don't breathe too hard, or he might think we're insurgents." She walked past him without a word, pulled out her phone, and texted her cousin, local news anchor, Channel 5. "Bet humiliated in store. PTSD joke. I know his name. Miles Hargrave. Bronze Star. You want this one?" Exactly 6 minutes later, the news van was already pulling into the parking lot. Brent didn't notice. He was too busy talking about how dudes with trauma need therapy, not aisle maps. But outside, Miles hadn't driven away. He was sitting quietly in his pickup, gripping the steering wheel with both hands, staring at the shadow box mounted to the inside of the glove compartment door. His medals, yes, but also his rules. Rule 1. Don't make noise unless it's for help. Rule 2. Don't ask anyone to thank you. Rule 3. Leave places better than you found them. He hadn't broken those rules in 20 years. But today, someone else had. So when Sierra called and said, "They're here. News team," I told them the truth. Miles didn't hesitate. He drove around the block and pulled right up beside the van. The camera was already rolling. Miles didn't shout. He didn't wave a sign or curse anyone out. He just stepped onto the curb, straightened his jacket, and said into the mic, "I don't want anyone fired. I want people to remember that war doesn't always end at customs. Sometimes, it follows you to aisle 7, disguised as a joke." And in that moment, standing outside a place where he once rebuilt the roof during a storm just because the town needed it, the world finally saw him, not as an old man with stories, but as a man who hadn't stopped serving. Not when the war ended. Not when the bombs stopped falling. And certainly not when some kid forgot what respect looked like. 6 minutes. That's all it took for a whisper to become a storm. While Brent polished his ego in the break room, laughing at his own punchlines and reenacting Miles's quiet confusion like it was some viral skit, the parking lot outside the store was becoming something else entirely. News crew cables snaked across the asphalt. A camera operator wiped down a lens, and a local anchor in a navy blazer rehearsed names. Miles Hargrave. Hargrave. Bronze Star recipient. Iraq, 2007, two-time Community Service awardee. Not that Brent noticed. Inside, he was still holding court with 2 bored employees and a half-eaten energy bar, pantomiming what he called a flashback face, complete with wide eyes and ducking like someone had thrown a grenade. "Boom," he said. Guess he thought the ceiling fan was an Apache. A couple of kids laughed. Not hard, but enough. Just enough. Sierra didn't laugh. She stood behind the counter, phone in hand, already receiving live text updates from her cousin in the van. 2 minutes. "We're setting up. Tell him to stay." But Miles didn't need telling. He'd come back on his own. Not for revenge. Not even for justice. Just so people didn't forget. And when the van door slid open and the anchor stepped out, the first thing she said wasn't a question, it was a promise. "We're here to listen." And they did. They let Miles speak. No cuts, no edits, no talking over him. Just a handheld mic, a still camera, and a man in a threadbare coat standing beneath the familiar sign of the store he had shopped at for 11 years without a single discount, handout, or request. "I didn't ask anyone to salute me," he said calmly. "I just asked where the sealant was. That was it." His voice didn't crack, but it didn't need to, because the steadiness in it was louder than anything Brent had ever shouted. "They laughed," Miles continued. "Because I mentioned memory loss. Because I said the word PTSD. He took a breath, and the camera zoomed in slightly. But I wasn't confused. I knew what I was looking for. I always do. That would seal it? It's for a neighbor. She uses a walker. I've been patching her deck for years so she doesn't fall. I just forgot the label this time. A beat." Then he pulled something from his coat, a folded paper, aged at the seams. "This is the list," he said, holding it up. "The same one I've used every time. I fold it the same way. I write the same note, 2 coats. Let dry. I do that so I don't forget. Not because I'm broken. Because I'm still trying." And in that moment, something shifted. Not just in the tone, but in the way the world tilted. Inside, someone tapped Brent on the shoulder and pointed toward the front window. He squinted and saw the tripod, the crowd, the phone cameras, the news. His smirk flickered for the first time. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, stepping outside. Miles didn't look at him. He didn't have to. The crowd had already started forming, a mother holding her toddler, a man in a veteran ball cap, a woman with tears in her eyes who whispered, "That's the guy who fixed my fence after the flood." The camera panned over the gathering, and Brent, flustered, still wearing his apron and still stained with breakfast burrito, tried to reclaim the moment. "This is being taken way out of context," he announced, hands raised. The guy was acting weird. "I was just trying to lighten the mood." But the words didn't land. Not anymore. Because the mood had changed. And someone had captured the clip of him mocking Miles, the twitch, the fake salute, the ghost joke. It had already been uploaded. Already had 42,000 views in 20 minutes. One of the store associates walked out, holding her phone, showing the video to another. "He really said that?" she whispered. Out loud. The news anchor stepped toward Brent. "Sir, would you like to respond to Mr. Hargrave's statement?" Brent hesitated. "Look, I didn't know who he was, okay?" And that's when Miles finally turned in. His voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. "You don't have to know who someone is to treat them with basic respect." Brent froze. Because the words didn't come with threat. They came with weight. And behind Miles, the crowd stood a little taller. One by one, people started holding up receipts. Old ones. New ones. Veterans. Neighbors. Strangers. He helped my dad after chemo. He delivered plywood during lockdown. He built birdhouses for the school fundraiser. And then, Sierra spoke on camera. "He's the reason I didn't quit last year. The only reason. He came in after my shift ended just to ask if I was doing okay. No one else noticed I was crying. He did." Brent took a step back. "This is ridiculous." But it wasn't. It was overdue. A reckoning written in silence and sealed in dignity. And just like that, the manager who once mocked a war survivor in front of 2 stock boys and a paint display was now surrounded by 30 people who had all been helped, repaired, saved, or noticed by the man he thought was just a ghost in aisle 7. Someone handed Miles a mug of coffee. Someone else placed a hand on his shoulder. But Miles didn't gloat. Didn't speak again. He just looked down at the folded list in his coat pocket, thumbed the edge, and nodded once, to no one in particular. Not because he won, but because, for the first time in years, someone had seen him. And more importantly, someone had believed him. By morning, the world knew. Not just about what happened to Miles Hargrave in aisle 7, but about who he was. Because by the time the sun rose over town, every major local outlet had run the clip. Not the polished version, The raw one. The shaky cell phone footage. Brent's voice. The mockery. And then, Miles's calm reply. You don't have to know who someone is to treat them with basic respect. It landed like a nail driven clean through the national mood. Sierra's cousin at Channel 5 hadn't even planned to run it in full, just to feel good closer for the noon show. But the editor overrode it. Said it reminded him of his father. Said, this isn't just a story. It's a mirror. By 7 a.m., it hit syndication. By 9 o'clock, it hit social media, hard. Hashtag aisle7 was trending. So was hashtag Hargrave did it right. So was hashtag PTSD is real. It was no longer just about a manager's bad joke. It was about every time a veteran came home and got dismissed, every time a trauma got turned into a punchline, every time someone gave years of their life and came back to find that the country only remembered them on clearance bin holidays. And the receipts came flooding in. Not just metaphorically, physically, boxes of them. Veterans across the state returned items they had bought from the chain store. Tarks, nails, screws, shovels, mulch, power tools, bags of potting soil, paint. One man even returned a full riding lawnmower and duct-taped a note to the seat. I don't do business with people who spit on the silent. Corporate's inbox broke. They tried issuing a statement. We are aware of an isolated incident involving one of our store managers and are conducting an internal review. But people weren't buying it. Because dignity doesn't get reviewed. It gets defended. And for the first time in a long time, the public was doing just that. By 10:24 a.m., a convoy of veterans, real, quiet, battle-worn, began arriving at the store parking lot. Not angry, not shouting, just present, standing, holding signs that didn't scream, just spoke. We still remember. You mocked the wrong man. Respect isn't seasonal. Inside, Brent was pacing the break room, shirt untucked, face flushed, phone glued to his hand as he scrolled in panic. His mother had texted, I saw you on TV. Is it true? His district manager had emailed 3 times in all caps, stay OFF camera. Say nothing. And his assistant manager had walked off the 4 hours ago, after telling Sierra, he's on his own. Then the black SUV pulled up. No sirens. No flashing lights. But you could feel the rank coming off it. 2 figures stepped out, one in a pressed gray blazer, the other in full dress uniform, metals shining clean under the daylight. Commander Hale, retired Navy, now Regional Director of Veteran Relations. And beside her, Deputy CEO Leonard Mackey, a man who rarely visited store-level operations, unless something was very, very wrong. Miles wasn't there when they arrived. He hadn't planned to return. He was home, scraping old sealant off his neighbor's porch like nothing had happened, like the whole town wasn't chanting his name through likes and shares and local radio. But Sierra had texted him again. They're here. They want to talk. Not to defend. To listen. And that word, listen, was the only one that made him put down his brush, wipe his hands, and head back in. Brent was standing by the service desk, trying to pretend he was leading, trying to act like he had just misunderstood, that it had all been misinterpreted. He didn't notice the silence behind him. He didn't notice that even the cashier who used to laugh at his jokes now stared straight ahead, jaw tight. When Miles walked through the sliding glass doors, the noise outside died. Veterans turned. Civilians stepped back. Employees straightened. And Commander Hale was the first to move, not with pomp, but with gravity. She crossed the floor, paused 2 feet in front of him, and saluted. The room held its breath. Miles didn't return the salute, not because he didn't respect her, but because salutes, for him, were sacred. He nodded instead. Once. Slow. And that was enough. She lowered her arm. Mr. Hargrave, she said, I'm here to formally apologize on behalf of every institution that failed to remember what you gave, and what you still give. Her voice didn't waver. And I'm also here to ask if you'd be willing to let us name something after you. The Vet Outreach Program. A scholarship. A memorial bench. Anything. Miles thought about it. Then he smiled softly. I don't need a nameplate, he said. I just want that manager to know why he was wrong. Not that he was caught. That he was wrong. Behind him, Brent tried to interrupt, started to blurt something about not meaning it, but Mackey raised a single hand. It was the kind of gesture that froze careers. No, Mackey said. Let him finish. And when Miles turned to Brent, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He just told the truth. You thought you were being funny. You thought you saw weakness. But you didn't see the deck I rebuilt for that woman in the wheelchair. You didn't see the schoolhouse I painted after hours because the funding fell through. You didn't see the nights I sat awake trying not to dream, or the mornings I stood in this store wondering if anyone saw me. You saw an old man, and you laughed at the only battle I haven't won yet. Brent swallowed, but there was no comeback. Because you can't out-talk truth. Mackey stepped in then, turned to the staff. This store, he said, is no longer under Brent's management. A slow, stunned silence followed. Then Sierra, brave, clear-eyed Sierra, asked, "Who's it under now?" Mackey turned to Miles. "It's not official, but everyone here's already calling it Hargrave Supply." That name stuck. No signage, no rebranding. Just the quiet decision of a town that chose to remember. And Miles didn't gloat, didn't speak again. He just turned, walked out, and returned to the porch he'd been sealing since dawn. By week's end, the store posted record returns, not in profits, but in volunteers. Sierra was promoted. Brent was quietly transferred to a warehouse facility in the next state over, pending review. And a new employee handbook was issued, company-wide, with one added line. We serve those who have served. With respect. Without question. At the center of the break room, pinned in a plastic sleeve, was a photo. Not of war. Not of medals. Just of Miles. In his coat. Holding his folded receipt list. Smiling faintly. The caption read, "He never asked to be seen. But he made sure you'd remember." The following spring, the porch Miles had sealed became a gathering place. Kids read there. Neighbors sat for coffee. And every so often, a passing stranger would slow down, nod toward it, and say, "That's Hargrave's porch. It's the one that never cracked."